Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Nimzo-Larsen Attack, which is one of the most interesting openings in chess in my opinion. So this is going to be the first video of a multiple part series where we go through different replies by black to this move 1 b3. So today we're going to be talking about b3 e5 systems. So without wasting any time, let's get into it. So b3 e5, bishop b2. Now a couple of things to note about this opening. Almost all variations of Nimzo-Larsen attack revolve around this e5 square. Whether there's a pawn there or there's not a pawn there, it doesn't matter. The control of e5 is crucial in this opening, even in d5 systems, even in other systems. So keep that in mind. So okay, black plays knight to c6, defending e5. We play pawn to e3, and here there's different ways for black to play. d5 is the more popular one. There's also d6, which we will get into momentarily. But okay, let's discuss d5, and here we go bishop to b5. The purpose of bishop to b5 is to pin the knight to the king and attack this e5 pawn. So if a6 is played, you simply capture and capture on e5. Obviously, this is good for white. If knight to e7 is played, you capture on e5 immediately, taking advantage of this pin. So black has to play a kind of move that defends the e5 pawn directly. So let's discuss bishop to d6. This is the main move. And here, notice something. When the bishop went to d6, it stopped defending this g7 pawn. And this is important because we can actually take advantage of this by putting more pressure on the e5 pawn with pawn to f4, and also putting major pressure on this diagonal. So let's say this pawn is captured on f4. Here we can take on g7. Yes, black can play queen to h4, which looks a little bit scary, but it's not. We can play king to f1. And just one more trick that you have to be aware of here: if f takes e3 is played, you cannot just simply capture the rook, because queen to f2 will be checkmate. You have to reply with queen to e1 here, offering a queen trade. And this rook's not really going anywhere. It is going to be captured momentarily. So after pawn to f4, there's a couple of ways black can reply. Let's discuss queen to e7 first. I don't think this is the most accurate reply to this opening, because I think after knight to f3, pawn to f6, we can attack this pawn on d5 with a move like knight to c3, and after bishop to e6, pawn to or castles, knight h6, pawn to e4, pawn to d4, and then knight to d5, attacking this queen. We get a very active position here, and one of the major ideas after exchanging is to play pawn to c4 in this position, which reinforces the knight. And also there's a very malicious idea here, and it is to play pawn to c5 as well. And what pawn to c5 does is it removes bishop from defending this pawn. So let's say, for example, queenside castles, which is not a very good move. Pawn to c5, bishop takes, knight takes. As you can see, there's a pin here. Regardless of whether king's on e8 or the queen's on d7, this is still a pin, and this is a very dangerous position for black. As you can see, white is already better here. Yeah, just another line here with pawn to a6. Here we don't capture, we come back, and after castles, rook to c1. Again, we're threatening c5, and this idea is actually so strong that pawn to b6 cannot actually stop it. We play c5 regardless, because after pawn takes, here we can play pawn to b4, and here black's just in trouble because this knight is very difficult to defend. Either black loses the knight on c6, or black loses the pawn on e5 by, I don't even know here, it's actually very difficult to even find a move for black. But let's say if this was played to go bishop d7 or something, after captures bishop e7, the knight is still going to be won. Actually, not even this move defends the knight, because after this exchange, knight takes e7, this is a free queen. So even bishop d7 is not enough tactically to defend this knight. Okay, so let's go back to beginning position, not beginning, but in this position here. Instead of queen to e7, there's also this move, which is queen to h4 check, inducing g3, which weakens all the light squares here, and then going back to e7. This right here is a better version for black of just playing queen to e7. After knight to f3, pawn to f6, knight to c3, pretty similar position here. We play d4, and then we play knight to e5. And this basically attacks the knight, so puts more pressure on the knight. And if it is taken, we can play this move, queen to h5, and go for this position right here, which is slightly better for white. Despite having doubled pawns, this pawn is actually pretty good controlling the f6 square, making black's development a little bit more difficult. And also there's still a pin here, so this pawn cannot be taken immediately. And another move here is a move like pawn to f6 immediately in this position. And here the plans are kind of similar. We go knight c3 attacking d5, knight to e7, and we play this queen to h5 move to induce g6 to somewhat weaken this chain of pawns. And then we retreat all the way back to f2, so queen f3, e4, queen f2, castles. We capture here, knight cannot capture because knight takes d5, so black has to take with a pawn. And after knight to e2, it is a very equal position here, but it is very dynamic. We might even get opposite side castling, or if you don't like that, you prefer more positional chess, you can also castle king side and play like that. Okay, let's go back to this position now. In this position, instead of d5, black can stay solid and play pawn to d6. And here it is a completely different game, because it is of course going to be pretty much near impossible to win this pawn on e5. So here we just play positional chess. So we can start with pawn to c4, controlling d5, of a key move in these sorts of positions. And after knight to f6, knight c3, bishop e7, there's this idea queen to b1. And actually I found this idea is actually a novelty, and I found this while analyzing one of my students' games, and I thought it was a pretty cool idea, so I wanted to share it with you. And the idea is that you are getting on this diagonal from b1 to h7, and you don't want to go to c2 because knight b4 might come with tempo, and you don't want to allow that. You want to go queen b1 and get on this diagonal as soon as possible. You can play a3, but a3 wastes time, and in the opening, time is what matters most. So after queen to b1, a lot of interesting things can happen. Knight to f3 and bishop to g4. And here you can play in a multiple different ways. First of all, you can play h3 and pretty much induce black to capture on f3 and go into this position where white basically has a lot of open lines and open diagonals here for attacking. So this is a very, very dynamic position. Best move by black here is to open up the center as quickly as possible with pawn to d5. Whenever you're getting attacked on the flank, it is best to counterattack in the center. So here, that is why black counterattacks in the center with d5. And after captures, bishop to d3, pawn to g6, king e2, safeguarding all the pawns here. We get this kind of a position, which is very, very dynamic. You can analyze this position further on your own in your own time if you want to. But this, in my opinion, is one of the coolest lines you can play from this opening. Okay, so going back, if you guys don't like that very dynamic position, you can play something a bit more reserved, which is pretty much just as good, and that's bishop to e2. And after queen to d7 here, pawn to h3, bishop h5, pawn to d3, stopping this kind of attack on the queen once the bishop gets to g6, a5, pawn to g4, bishop g6, knight h4, going after the bishop. This is an equal position. You could argue white is slightly better because white is going to get the bishop pair, but it's probably objectively equal, and we get just a normal game from this opening. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe. This video will have multiple, or this series will have multiple parts. Next part will be about b3, d5. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you in the next video.